Good morning. It's Monday morning. Maybe it's probably not morning when you see this, and it's probably not even Monday, but anyway, it is here, and it's a beautiful day in Newburgh. Sun is shining. There's brilliant red maple leaves outside my door on maybe it's a sugar maple, and I'm really enjoying the change of the season here, and we still haven't gotten into our heavy rain yet. This is a brief reflection on the session on mentoring relationships. I'm going to make a few comments on both the discussion forum and on the Who Am I as a Mentor assignment. Excuse me. First off, a couple of general comments about the way that you folks are handling the assignments. The first one is I really appreciate the way most of you are handling your own discussion threads. After your original posting, you're being really faithful to watch what others are posting in response to you, and you're getting in there and having a dialogue with others. And I think that's the best approach, and it's good to continue monitoring and responding where appropriate. Secondly, on the Who Am I as a Mentor assignment, the one thing I noticed, and maybe my directions weren't really clear, is many of you did not give a real complete description of the population you intended on having for your mentoring relationship, and we're not going to have that assignment again, but I'd say for future reference, make sure you describe and identify clearly. Don't make any assumptions about the reader knowing who it is or who they are or even their characteristics. And finally, I really appreciated the truthful self-reflection. I felt like, at least to the extent that I know each of you, that you did a nice job of being honest with yourself, looking at both strengths and weaknesses. Several of you mentioned how difficult that is to actually reflect on your own strengths and weaknesses. And I believe that's true, but I also appreciate the fact that you were being honest, and there was quite a variability in the levels of scores that you assigned yourselves on the qualities. Now I'd like to touch on a few of what I would consider to be the keys or the highlights of that I extracted from all of your work that I think are important. This is not an exhaustive list, and it's not meant to be kind of a formal review, but just more of some things that really struck me. Openness with each other in a mentoring relationship is important, and several of you identified as one of your qualities to be assessed, the ability of the mentor to be open, which is both in a way of kind of emotionally open and vulnerable, but also in a way of giving honest feedback to the mentee. Empathy and wisdom were both cited by several people, and I'm not entirely sure how you measure wisdom, but I do think experience plays a role in that, and empathy and the distinction between empathy and sympathy is a point that was made, and empathy, I think, is clearly an important characteristic for a mentor, being able to put yourself in the place of the other person. A couple of things were identified as constraints or weaknesses, perhaps, that are not just the responsibility of the mentor or the mentee. These are organizational concerns as well, like the organizational culture, what the organization values, and to not just values, but resources, and including one of the most important resources, which is time. Several people identified the need for time or the lack of time to be able to commit, or the lack of availability as an important consideration in mentoring. And I certainly think that's not just an individual concern, that's an organizational concern. Several people, in fact, most of you pointed out professional competence was a really important key to good mentoring, because even though you might be empathetic and encouraging to another person, if you yourself are not competent in the role in which you are mentoring the mentee in, then it's more difficult, or even not even making sense that you would be a mentor. Active listening was mentioned a number of times, and several of you identified that as a weakness, that you said you're more likely to fill quiet space, dead space with talk, and you recognize that active listening is a really important part of the role. And I certainly agree with that, and it made me even wonder at times if we are lacking in our professional preparation as educators in helping people learn the value of quiet and the value of listening and teaching one another how to do that. I was kind of impressed with this notion that mentoring is the work of the heart, the head, and the hands. In other words, there needs to be a passion and a commitment to the work. There needs to be intellectual engagement as far as using tools that work, not just listening and not just empathy, but being able to develop the structures to get at what's really important in learning and listening together. But also it's the hands of mentoring is like the actual making the commitments and following through and using the processes that the organization asks of us in whether it's face-to-face or online mentoring, and whether it's working with people in your own building or in other buildings within an organization. A couple of kind of broader points that I found interesting when you were engaging in the discussion forum was the stages of adult development, which kind of morphs over to the stages of a mentoring relationship. In other words, you don't just sit down on the first meeting with a colleague and bare your souls to one another. There's some type of a development process here by which trust is earned, respect is gained, and commitments are made so that people are able to do this important work of mentoring together. So I think those are some of the key points. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but made an impression on me. I wanted to mention one other thing in particular, which was a couple of people discussed evaluation of mentoring program and more than just a passing notion. And I appreciated a question that was posed as, what are the measures that we'll use to evaluate a mentoring relationship or a mentoring program? And this is something that Gary Kilberg and I wrestled with a lot when Gary was here at Fox and running our mentoring center. And with my background in evaluation, we often planned into a new project that Gary was pulling off what the evaluation would be. And I think ultimately, and we've discussed this before, at least in text, the actual end result of students or clients getting to where they need to be or we want them to be is really kind of the bottom line, the end game for evaluating mentoring programs. In other words, it's not just that a beginning teacher feels well served by her mentor. It's, are we seeing changes in practice in that beginning teacher as a result of the mentoring program that is helping her students achieve better or more? And that's a really difficult thing to measure because we don't know if we're measuring on the spot at the end of the week, at the end of the term, at the end of the school year, or years down the line. But more and more, when we're investing time and resources into mentoring, we expect to see some result down the line for the people for whom the mentee is serving, and the mentor, by the way, because as we've discussed in the previous session, this is a mutually beneficial relationship. Okay, I think that's it. I'm looking at my notes, and there are a few other things here, but I think I've taken up enough of your time. Blessings to you, and I trust that as you move into session 3, as you grapple with the nuts and bolts of the mentoring program, that you're going to come up with some good basic structures. Take care, and see you next time.